What's up, everyone? Welcome back to StrangeCast, a Life is Strange podcast made by fans for fans. I am one of your hosts, Adnan. My co-host Adam is here. Adam, you're here.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm alive, and I'm uking it up. But how are you?
I'm not too bad. Obviously, you have your banjo. We've been trying to.
It's the ukulele. What the?
Well, the ukulele then. Actually, yeah, banjo's bigger, isn't it? Ukulele small. Well.
Yeah, banjo's just like it looks like a little snare drum on the top, and then all the way there, and then ukulele is Hawaiian, like a pineapple pizza.
Well, there you go. You live and learn. So yeah, we are back after about 2-month hiatus of, just generally, obviously a lot of things happened in my life. So we went on hiatus and we've been trying to record this episode 5 times at least on Zencastr, and it's not worked. For some reason, it keeps kicking Adam out. So we've now moved on to Riverside, which is going to be hopefully the new home of StrangeCast. And it's obviously we're doing this because we want to get really high quality audio, high quality recordings for you guys to watch. So I need to probably change my overlays and everything in between all this. Welcome back to this podcast. If you are new here, do please leave subscribe, like, share it with your friends. It really does help with the channel. I think we're about 860 plus subscribers, so we're slowly climbing to 1,000 mark, and it really helps. And about 50% of the traffic that comes to the YouTube channel isn't subscribed. So if you are here and you are watching, do please subscribe. It really does help us out with, just in general, it helps us out. And also, to those who are returning, thank you so much for coming back. And with that, on top of that, we are on podcast services. So we are on pretty much everything. There's a video version available on Spotify. And also we are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher. We're on Google Podcasts. We're on Amazon Music. I've signed up to pretty much everything in the last couple of weeks. Our RSS feed is pretty much on most podcast services. So you can tune in via that and just see the audio only versions in most cases. But yeah, we're back after.
And did I hear, like, in the beginning of this episode, was there like a new theme song? It sounded weird,
Well, it depends on how good my editing skills are. So hopefully I will try and integrate that at some point. Adam has recorded generously for us a StrangeCast theme, which I will be looking at some way of integrating into this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but hopefully I somehow figure out how to do it. But you can actually listen to that on Spotify as well. I will leave a link in the description as well. So if you do want to listen to it, Adam is making music as well. So, I hope you enjoy it. It was very, I would send Adam if you ever watch Friends, the video of Ross playing the keyboard, where he's playing his that long build of that episode where they're like, hey, Ross plays the music. Such a good show. So I think we will kick things off with our new, our first session, our first topic. Sorry, I'm trying to podcast mark this as well. It helps me out. But yeah, we'll kick off with our first topic, which is obviously going to be the Life is Strange fans website is launched. We're going to give them a plug here because, if you have been on Twitter, Life is Strange fans is like the place to be for seeing Life is Strange content. I owe Chris an infinite debt for the amount of support that he has given this channel and how much he's actually helped promote this content as well. And I feel like I need to return that favor here. And the website does look very slick. I believe he launched it late April after I think he's working it for so long. He was working so long to revamp the website. And it does look incredible. If you just go and sign up to www.lifeisstrangefans.com, just go and have a look at it. It's so slick. I know, Player One versus the World is on there at the minute. We are uploading content slowly, so we've got Life After Strange on there, about 4 episodes. I will keep getting more and more on there, and I think StrangeCast will obviously will have a home there at some point. But yeah, I just wanted to give him a shout out because he put so much work towards it, and no one's asked him to do it, but because he's such a big fan, he's done an incredible commitment to doing something which loads of people will really take away as a great home to kind of access content from the franchise, and obviously including myself as well. I'm on there looking and seeing who's on there, so it's definitely worth doing that. And I imagine May's helped him out as well. I've never spoken to May. I think I've interacted with her a couple of times. I've never actually spoken to her, which is a bit of a shame. And I would love to have her on here. I know you've spoken to her on Games and Groceries.
Yeah, she's been on the show twice, including our little series about Tell Me Why. So she recorded for episode 2, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, she's fantastic. I have not had any interactions with Chris, but I'm sure he is a swell guy. And that's
I like
it.
that dynamic as well. That I've interacted with Chris and you've interacted with mine. It's like
Yeah,
there's two different ways going about it. But yeah, definitely go and check out their website. I just wanted to give them a plug here because it's, we talk about Life is Strange content on here, and that's a huge part of Life is Strange universe. So definitely worth checking out their website. Adam, have you checked their website out?
I have. It's very sleek and rich with color. It's very smooth too. It looks very, very professional. Not to say that I was expecting any different, but I need to spend more time with it. I just haven't had much time to have time with it, I guess. But from what I've seen with it, it looks incredibly impressive. So if you haven't signed up already, if you haven't registered, get down there, do it now. Register for lifeisstrangefans.com. Do it now.
Absolutely. I believe he did. I think Chris did Day's website.
Did he?
Yeah, I'm
cool.
pretty sure that Chris helped Day set up her website. I could be awfully wrong, but I'm pretty sure of that. But yeah, do check that out. So we will move on from that, and we will move on to our next topic. This kind of broke out whilst we were on hiatus, and I wanted to kind of come back to it because it's quite interesting. A lot of news came out from this. It was left field as well. I was not expecting this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to VG247. We've got Dom Pepiat, who's a features editor there, 3rd of May 2022. So the title was Square Enix Keeps Just Cause, Life is Strange, and Outriders. So they reported at the time, yesterday we heard landmark news that Square Enix has agreed to the sale of Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, and Lara Croft Go, along with the studios that make the games, to the Embracer Group. The company, which has been on something of a purchasing spree lately, has agreed to acquire 3 of Square Enix's Western studios, Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal, alongside a suite of IP that once belonged to Square Enix. But Square isn't so keen to offload all of its Western IPs just yet. A press release from the Japanese publisher has confirmed the company will retain the rights to the Just Cause, Life is Strange, and Outriders franchises. I believe he meant to put franchise at the end of there, but he didn't have it. But we'll put it in to help him out there. Furthermore, the indie-focused Square Enix Collective will remain under the parent company and will continue to operate. The Japanese publisher said in the press release, and I quote, "Going forward, the company's development function will comprise its studios in Japan, Square Enix External Studio, and Square Enix Collective. The company's overseas studios will continue to publish franchises such as Just Cause, Outriders, and Life is Strange," end quote. Here's hoping we'll still get some quality games from those series, and that Square Enix's focus on quote-unquote investment in fields including blockchain, AI, and the cloud, end quote, won't leave gamers hungry for traditional projects out in the cold. So yeah, and just to add on to that as well, because obviously we didn't cover the original news, but it's no secret that Square Enix has been publicly disappointed in its Western studios and the performance of non-Japanese IPs. Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Marvel's Avengers, and the Guardians of the Galaxy were all classed as sales disappointments for the studio, despite the latter being one of the funniest games written in recent years. I mean, you can attest to that, and I'll let you get into that in a minute. The two companies announced the $300 million cash transaction early on Monday morning, confirming that the deal will include an absolutely massive 50-plus IPs. And yeah, so pretty much that. So, Adam, do you want to go first? Should I give you the floor here?
This is the strange... okay, well, I'll say, I was like, no pun intended, but now pun intended. This is the strangest deal I've ever seen in the video game industry since I've been following it anyway. I don't know if there's been a stranger deal, in past revenues. I don't know. But this is just a weird thing because they got rid of all their Western IPs and they kept some of the less Western because like we said, like Life is Strange is still retained. I wouldn't count Life is Strange as a Western IP at all because it's not really like a Western RPG. It's not really a Western
but I have to interrupt you here. But in the vein, it is a Western IP, though.
It is a Western IP. It's set in America. Like I get that, but like it more lies towards like a visual novel almost. So it is weird. Like Life is Strange is in that mix of like it's Western, but but when they got rid of Tomb Raider, I would consider that a Western IP. Even Outriders, I think Outriders was in that deal. Yeah, which
Oh no, Outriders wasn't. They kept hold of Outriders.
They kept hold of. Okay, That's so weird. Why are they keeping Outriders? It's so
It sells well.
I mean, it didn't. Like, I don't think it got critically. Well, here's the thing about Square Enix, whatever. Here's the thing about them is that no matter what game they put out, no matter if it's a Final Fantasy game, they'll be like, "Oh, we're disappointed with the sales numbers. Those sales numbers weren't that great. Oh, it doesn't sell." Blah blah blah. I think they just recently celebrated like Final Fantasy 15's.
Yeah, but Final Fantasy that's a seller though.
But yeah, that's the only thing that they actually celebrate with the sales numbers, and it's just like. And that's the thing. They never talk about it. They were disappointed with Guardians of the Galaxy. They were disappointed with Avengers, which, duly noted. They're disappointed with Outriders. They were definitely disappointed with Outriders because it didn't give the team a bonus. So it's just like weird how they. Yeah, that's the thing. It was just like such a messy situation because the sales number for Outriders wasn't that great. Well, in their opinion. And now they're just keeping the things that they were the least satisfied with. So it's like, I don't know what to make of this. It's just it's a phenomenon. I don't know if I'm glad that they're keeping Life is Strange,
Well, so in itself, when I saw this news, it was really strange because they've sold a lot of IPs. So they sold like 50 plus IPs. I think including in that is Sleeping Dogs, which is one of the best games I've played in the last decade.
Yeah.
And I was thankful for that because it means that we can actually maybe get a Sleeping Dogs sequel or a reboot or something.
So wait, did they sell off Sleeping Dogs or did they retain that?
It was part of that entire collective of IPs that they flogged off.
I thought so. So yeah. I don't think that really means that we're going to get a Sleeping Dogs at all because that's kind of like sweetened deal kind of thing that you see a lot of with sports traits, we'll treat you this guy with this many round picks, and I feel like Sleeping Dogs is like a third round pick, kind of like sweeten the deal, like, oh, we'll give you Sleeping Dogs. Will anything come of it? I very much doubt it, but there's hopes now, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that they do it because I knew that Square Enix wouldn't make it. Square Enix reminds me very much of Capcom. And if sales don't translate well in the West, then they pull something. So, for example, we haven't seen a Dead Rising game for a long time from Capcom.
Oh, you're right.
Because they pulled it because the sales it just stagnated, that series. It went downhill. And they only invest in stuff like where they know it's going to make a lot of money. For example, here's another example. Remember Me wasn't a bad game by Dontnod Entertainment, but it flopped commercially for Capcom. Hence why, it put even Dontnod in a struggling position where they will try to establish themselves as a studio. And the same with Resident Evil as well. Look how long it took them to kind of think about we need a new strategy for it. Let's revamp Resident Evil. Let's sell it in this new first-person line, and it's selling well. So in itself, when you look at some of the sales figures for Tomb Raider, for example, I believe it sold over 30 million copies across its entire that period where it's been owned by Square Enix, which is great in terms of numbers, but for Square Enix that isn't good. And it's the same with the article said Guardians of the Galaxy is acclaimed, it's won by so many awards, I've heard so many great things from so many people, but because it's not shipping the numbers that Square Enix expects as a Japanese publisher selling in the West, it's not going to keep hold of the IP. And that's where you have the issue with I think Outriders they probably kept because they think hey, maybe, I've completely forgot about the bonus story when you told me about it. That does make sense. It wasn't complete seller, but they were kind of hey, you know what? We'll keep hold of this one. We'll keep hold of Just Cause because it seems to do relatively well, and we'll keep hold of Life is Strange because obviously True Colors did well in the charts. And in itself, these IPs, if they want to keep selling well, they do have to adapt. They need to keep being successful, otherwise then Square Enix will start selling them off. So that's my concern with it. And obviously Final Fantasy in itself, I can understand why they keep Final Fantasy. It's such a lucrative IP.
Yeah, it is also weird that they kept such niche IPs, very niche, like Just Cause. Who do you know? Literally, do you know anybody that plays Just Cause? Anybody?
No.
I don't know a single person that actually plays Just Cause, but they keep coming out with games. They just in 2015, not Just Cause 4 or is it 3? I think there's 4.
I think 3 is the last one that I know of. Maybe there is a Just Cause 4.
Either way, it's just they keep making these games, and it's just I don't know a single person that's ever played a Just Cause game. I haven't even touched it, and it's on Game Pass, and I haven't even touched it.
is the last one.
There's 4. I'm pretty sure the 4th one is on Game Pass or was on Game Pass. And I'm like, oh, cool.
2018 that was released as well.
2018?
2018.
Really?
Yeah, sequel to 2015 is Just Cause 3.
That's what I mean. I'm just like, I don't know. It's weird that they're keeping that. It's weird that they're keeping Outriders. It's weird that they're keeping. It's really weird that they're keeping Life is Strange, because it seems like Square Enix doesn't really care about Life is Strange ever. But they got rid of Tomb Raider. Somebody thought that they got rid of Hitman, but Hitman has already been sold off. That was in IO. Is it IO Interactive?
IO Interactive, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, there's just some weird. It was just the weirdest transaction I've ever seen. I'm like, oh my god, they sold, like, Square Enix was sold. It's like, no, they sold Sleeping Dogs and kept Outriders, and they sold Tomb Raider but kept Life is Strange. And it's like, what? Wait,
yeah, it's a weird, like, I think personally they're streamlining the company. It has like a lot of hit and misses, and like in between itself, like the Life is Strange games, they obviously recruit some of the external studios to kind of help work on them. So it's like, if studios aren't constantly producing content in the terms of, like, look at, for example, Konami, when the entire, like, fallout happened with Kojima in 2015, they streamlined everything. They stopped making PES games at one point. They put so much investment in that Kojima Productions Fox engine. At that point, they just gave up on the gaming space for a little bit of a period. Look how many IPs they have. They have Castlevania, Silent Hill, Metal Gear. Look at all PES. Look at all these franchises, and they don't really spawn like the kind of system sellers, big kind of like MCU style kind of like blockbuster hits, which like people would want. That's what Square Enix is a bit like. Like if something doesn't sell, then they're going to be like, hang on a minute, we're not going to stick with this. Like, they sell units on games, for example, like Final Fantasy 15 was the one that you were talking about, which sold over 10 million copies recently. That's past that landmark, and they know that when they sell with that kind of like established branding franchise, they'll keep it. I think that's why Life is Strange is still lucrative for them. It has the branding, it has the IP. How long? That remains to be seen. How far these series actually evolved will be another question in itself. But yeah, like they basically flogged off things. This deal in itself makes me very wary, because obviously I still think there's going to be a big monopolization of the gaming industry. Like that Activision acquisition from Microsoft, Bethesda
I don't think
acquisition.
that's quite finalized yet, because our government, the U.S. government, is like very pissed about it. So
yeah, of course it will be. Because like
yeah,
of course it will be, because it's like Japanese publishers, for example, they won't, like, that's why Microsoft won't own them. They won't buy Square Enix, because Japanese publishers usually only sell to Japanese companies. They won't like have that kind of vested interest. Like, that's why it hurts Microsoft, because they've always wanted to tap into the Japanese market, but then it'll be hard without these IPs. But
we're scale bound. We're scale bound.
Yeah, so like this kind of like news will be in itself quite surprising. And only a couple of months ago, I think we had a StrangeCast topic which we shelved, which was going to be after Activision's acquisition from Microsoft. Would we see potentially Sony try and buy Square Enix? Because, you know, we've seen this kind of like thing where they've been buying studios. Bungie, for example, that was months in advance. That wasn't as a response to Activision. That was been in the works.
That's not how transitions work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it definitely wasn't a response to the Activision acquisition, but there's this kind of inkling where you look at all these like different publishers, studios. I think EA recently hinted, saying that they would be open to kind of being purchased. Like, and you look at all these like big behemoth publishers, like, you know, maybe Sony, Microsoft. It's like, how much are they really going to throw at these kind of things? And I think with Square Enix streamlining to the position it's in, I would see it more lucrative to PlayStation now than it was before. Because like they might not have Tomb Raider, for example, but like Life is Strange IP, you can imagine like flogging that off to another studio if you needed to do, and Outriders, whatever else. But the Final Fantasy IP is so important to PlayStation. You've seen it. Like, look at FF7 Remake, look at FF16. They love it. They really know how important that is to the Japanese market and to PlayStation branding as well. So them streamlining in itself, I was thinking just when this news was breaking, when we were talking about it, I was like, maybe this could actually lead to an acquisition at some point down the road. But for Square Enix to stay where it's at the minute was really surprising. It was like, hey, we're going to keep this IP, we're going to keep this IP, and we're going to keep this IP. And I'm like, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's just an interesting deal, and it's very strange. But I'm like, it's Square Enix, so I'm like, am I actually surprised? No. Like, am I hoping we get Sleeping Dogs 2? Yes. Am I hoping Skate 4 comes out? That's on another topic, but also yes, but it is what it is.
Yeah, like that's where these kind of conversations boil down to. It's like, obviously, like, I'm buzzed about Sleeping Dogs potentially getting a revamp. I think Tomb Raider needs it as well. I was that trilogy was strange that they released that. I was like 50-50 with it. I remember as well, because like when I was doing here's a fun topic, which is something that I've never been able to publish. When I was doing my university dissertation in journalism, I actually spoke to Rihanna Pratchett, who was the lead writer on the Tomb Raider reboot. But that interview's never been published online. It's just part of my dissertation. She actually spoke to me about Lara Croft and representation. It's fascinating, actually. It's a shame that I never actually wrote it for an actual publication. But yeah, she just like opened out. She's like, yeah, of course I'll talk to you. And I was like, oh, I was quite surprised. But it was interesting to see her perspective, because for me, Tomb Raider should never lag behind Uncharted. Lara Croft is an icon in video games. Yeah. Whatever you think of Lara Croft, she is an icon of video games, and especially from the early days of her establishment to even the revamp, like, you expect a bit more. She's just kind of like sitting in the sphere of gaming where it's like, and it's not even the same, like, like a Metroid game coming out, because people scream for a Metroid game from Nintendo. It's like, please bring a Metroid game. We want to see Samus in a new game. But with like Lara Croft, it's like, you look at it, it's like, oh, there's another Tomb Raider game coming out. And it should never be that. It should be like, oh, it's like, oh my God, Lara Croft is back. It should be that kind of expectation. So I think in itself, that'll be good for that IP. But I think probably they kept hold of the Life is Strange IP because of how well True Colors did, and I think because they've got a relationship with Deck Nine in terms of like their like their partnership. And I'm pretty convinced that the next Life is Strange is already in development as well. I would be very surprised if it isn't. That's why like, it's quite clearly that. And I think some of the other news we'll cover on Deck Nine will kind of come into this later on, which will kind of make a bit more sense about what they're doing as well. But I was quite taken aback by this news because it came out of nowhere, and I'm expecting, I think if you're watching this as well, whether we talk about Life is Strange or not, I think you should expect more of this, because the monopolization of the gaming industry will start now. People, these publishers be like, you know what, like, Microsoft be like eyeing up the studio. It's like, maybe I should buy that studio. Maybe I should buy that publisher. All these IPs come with it.
I think Microsoft's going to go after EA for sure, because EA is already in relationship. They're already in cahoots with Microsoft. So I think that transaction is going to go down pretty soon. So
it's a lot of IPs as well.
It is. One of those IPs is Skate 4. So I wouldn't mind if I got a Skate 4 exclusive. So who cares? I'm excited though. I'm excited for Skate 4. But this is a Life is Strange podcast, so
exactly. You can leave your Skate 4 behind for now. I imagine that you were like that with the Life is Strange games when they have the skaters outside and arcade. You're like, oh my God, look at these guys. They're so cool. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, actually, no lie. When the 60 frames per second came out, I immediately went to the scene where Justin. Yeah, where Justin's out with the skaters and all that, and I'm like, oh man, let me see this tray flip in 60 frames per second, and it was actually pretty sweet. Yeah, I believe,
and we're not covering it in this topic, like, or any of the other topics, but I believe even beyond the 2-month hiatus we've been, the Life is Strange remastered collection still has issues with it.
Yeah,
and like I've seen people posting. I think even someone posted the subtitle error again. I don't think they've even fixed that yet.
I never got these bugs though, so go Xbox.
Yeah,
and I was playing on my Xbox One, and I was playing on previous gen too, and it was no bugs except for episode 4. That was bad.
Yeah, well, you and the 5 other people who have Xboxes enjoyed that. But yeah, we'll leave it on that unless you've got anything else to add about this. The Square Enix news.
Nope. I have no other pieces of information on that.
Okie dokie. So we will move into our next topic. We are going to Montreal. We are going to see Dontnod at this point on their news. So this was a interview that I read back in April, and it was just quite interesting. So, and again, I think like there's more to pick apart from it as well if you're watching this. So it's Dontnod, it's at Games Industry Biz. It was Dontnod Montreal on recruiting gender balance. So managing director Frederica Ferney-Jennings, I hope I pronounced that right, shares how studios.
It's like, oh, I hope he's got this down.
I hope so. Shares how the studio's recruitment approach led to women making up almost half the team. So obviously, the studio was founded in 2020. The Canadian outpost of Life is Strange development studio has grown to a staff of 33 employees. 16 of them are women. Dontnod Montreal's Frederica tells Games Industry Biz Academy that didn't happen by accident. She says that the push started with Dontnod Montreal studio executive producer Luke, obviously, and studio creative director Michelle, of course. And I just want to read you this quote. So she said, when they initially reached out to me for the managing director position, they shared the vision they had for the studio. Although we are a Dontnod studio and Dontnod is quite known for its strong values around inclusivity and diversity, they had a strong idea of what they wanted to put in place for a studio in Montreal. As they were telling me about this, that's what struck me. The values you could find in Dontnod games were totally relating to what they wanted to be in the studio, if that makes sense. She says she saw Dontnod's position as an opportunity to consider how she would go about recruiting herself and extrapolate that out to pitches and practices that would appeal to women in the industry as effectively as men. So in itself, it's a long interview. There's like a lot to take away from it. It's an interesting interview. If you want to read more about Dontnod Montreal, its structure, she talks about a lot and how they, how they position things, how they're getting more people in it. But I wanted to bring this in because this is an important part of the Dontnod Montreal structure of like what it is. Like even when you go back to that other episode that we had where there's the four of them in the thumbnail, like look at it. There's two guys in there. There's two women in there. There's like it's an important part.
Who's in that picture?
Matcha. I told you. I pronounced that exactly. There's no pronunciation of a T in there. That's how I'm pronouncing it with a C in. I'm not going to start a fight with this, but yeah, there's four people in there, two women, two men. And this is an example of that studio, like, and anyone who's like really surprised by this news about how they try to get recruitment balance, like, did you ever play Life is Strange 2? Like, did you ever play that game? Compared to like Life is Strange 1, they couldn't have been more politically heavy with what they were talking about. Because I remember reviewing the first Life is Strange 2 episode, and obviously we all met embargoes and then we posted them, and then I went and started looking at other people's reviews, and it's very different in like how people felt about how they were handling the social themes and then the political themes of it. And I was like, I was a bit more lenient towards them. I was like, yeah, you know, they're there making a point. Like, you know, if they want to go with it, power to them. Other people, like, they were being really heavy handed with it. But what I'm saying, like, why it's important, because like the structure balance is that they need other people's voices and opinions to write it. Like they are, and I mean Michelle and Luke, for example, are two French people, men. What do they know about certain other things? Like, you know, like look at their games that they built. Life is Strange 1, for example, there's two female lead characters in there. It's always interesting to have other people's perspectives, how you write something, how you see something. And that's what they do with their kind of development process. They have to have very wide-ranging opinions and people's views to make these characters. You know, and I think this is even in Life is Strange interviews. I think like this is why, like, for example, Michelle would be on a Skype call at like 5 o'clock in the morning when they're doing the recordings in like Los Angeles or whatever, because they would read a line out and they might be like, whoever's reading it might be like, this might not be like the best way of explaining this. And they're like, right, cool. And they start rewriting it, and then they reread the line through, because like you're trying to get me, like this is like me going to trying to make an American TV show and expecting to get the American lingo from a high school, you know, and you watch it and I'm like, do even people talk like this? It's like when you watch an American TV show, try and get British lingo down. It's like, no one talks like this. So it's like, it's always an interesting thing to get other people involved, other people's perspective. And in itself, and I'll give you the platform in a second, this getting all the balance that they have, if they have equal men and women, it tells you the game they're making. It really does. Like, it tells you what their next game is going to be about. Because if they're getting very interesting gender balance, is it likely this next character is going to be a female protagonist? Is it going to be a man? Is it going to be trans? Who knows? Like, there's so many varying factors there, but it kind of gives you a perspective. If you look at all the people that they've hired, which I've done through like LinkedIn, look through who they are, look what makes them look what their experiences are. They need different voices. Like, you know, it's always interesting. If I sat there with Luke and we had a chat about something, we're talking about a French man and an English man sitting there, or an English man with a Asian background as well, like, you know, and we would have like diverse conversations, if anything, in itself. So I think like those kind of help and amplify the messages. They kind of even elaborate in the actual interview. Like, you know, she says like the message, the core messages are seen in Dontnod games, like what they do. We don't need to look at their catalog and see what their games are like. So I thought that was just a very interesting part of their news in Montreal, because obviously they're still quite quiet with what they're doing out there, and understandably so. But yeah, what did you make of that?
I do appreciate the way they're going about the hiring process. I did like this one quote from the article where they talked about even the I pulled up the wrong article. That's the next topic. Where they go about like the requirements to go into the jobs. And first of all, we go to job postings with inclusive female and male writing in French. But the best part was that instead, Dontnod Montreal focuses its postings more on qualifications like familiarity with key tools and letting candidates know that what the student is looking for. And she says, we don't make things mandatory. We don't tell people reading our job postings that if you don't have a specific skill, education, or ability, you cannot apply. So they're really just looking for, and I like what this says, we do it because we feel they can, the people who apply will do it because they feel they can bring something and be a great addition to the team, bring something to the table, bring a perspective, bring a skill of something to make the game better rather than like cookie cutter, like I went to this college, I am white, like these cookie cutter like bull craps. But I think perspectives and specific talents require a lot more dedication rather than, just like I went to college A and I got a piece of paper and therefore I'm qualified. But they're looking for a skill set that brings, new life to a Life is Strange game.
Well, that's if they're making a Life is Strange game. They're not. They're making a new IP, aren't they?
Oh, they're lying. Luke's watching this and he's just like, oh, well, they were just, you see. They're all lying. They're all liars.
No, but I'm glad that you brought that up because that is important. Like, as you said, they're not looking for degrees and kind of like when you look at a job spec and you see all the criteria, you're like, you do roll your eyes because like, what does this tell you about anyone? Yeah. Like, most of the jobs I've ever walked in and sat in front of someone and be like, let's talk, and then I eventually get the job. Cause it's like, I don't do CVs, I don't do stuff like that because it doesn't really tell you about someone, does it? Like, anyone could pretend to be right. They could be like, oh yeah, we're painting this, she's sitting there with her glass, whiskey rolling around on the ice. Anyone can pretend to be like that, but it doesn't tell you the heart and the characters that you're writing, the people you're talking to, the opinions, for example, like, Luke and Michelle, where their political views align. And that's not me digging at them anything, but where their political views line, where they kind of stand with like people, how they feel about things. Like you only need to go on their Twitter feed. Like, Luke was very engaged in the French presidential election. Where he's going to vote on that. But these are important things. I always find these kind of conversations important with the people you're watching, the creators of the game, because like what's their political leaning? There was a big kind of, conversation about like when the Dark Knight Rises came out and with like Christopher Nolan, it's like, where does he politically align himself? Like, this kind of like, even the concept of like the Dark Knight Rises, this Bane revolutionary character, who's kind of like causing chaos and anarchy. It's like very Latin American inspired in itself. Bane has got that kind of like, source of like story for him as well. But you kind of want to know what the writer's kind of saying about this kind of position. Same with the directors, the other people who make the games. That's the important part of this. And like that for them, they're going to do that. They're probably going to need the women in there as much as they need the men, and finding some kind of balance in the concentration of the story they're telling. And I think this, even when we go and revisit this, whenever they announce their game or whatever it is, it's going to be quite obvious, like, and like to re-emphasize, like, go and look at who's working there at the minute. Like, it's not hard for like, I've gone to like snoop through all of them. Like, they're probably now wondering like, who's that private person viewing my profile on LinkedIn? But go and look at who's working there. Look at who's like announced this. Like, I think when we did that news, and I guessed wrong with the person sitting next to Luke, Matcha, and Michelle, it was in itself like I was trying to determine, and even when I was doing it, I was like flicking through all the people trying to determine who it was. I was like, there's a lot of women here, there's a lot of women, there's like a lot of men here. I was like, and you could see the balance was already there. So like in itself, like they are right about it. Like, Dontnod makes those kind of games, they make those kind of like stories, and I think it's going to be their gender recruitment is going to be very evident in this next game. Like just the balance, whatever the story is, I think it's just an inkling of like, if you go and read for this full interview, you can probably get an idea of like why they're bringing in so many different voices, different opinions, different people who have had like different life experiences. That's what makes the games, isn't it?
No, yeah. And I think that Delph's Tale like transitions nicely into the next topic, even like what a good rounded set of perspectives does for a game.
Indeed, indeed. So we are going to Life is Strange True Colors. This was in late April. So it was Life is Strange True Colors wins Game of the Year at Gayming Awards, Gayming, Gayming Awards 2022. So the Gayming Awards 2022 took place last night with Life is Strange True Colors winning the coveted Game of the Year trophy. Nine and Square Enix's title also won 2 other awards, Authentic Representation and Best LGBT Character for its protagonist, Alex Chen. Other winners included Resident Evil Village, which took home the Gaming Magazine Readers Award, and Unpacking, which won the Best LGBTQ Indie Game Award. So I'm not going to read any of that. The rest is just a press quote. So that was news for Life is Strange True Colors. I was going to be very surprised if it didn't win this award, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
It was pretty it was a very open about where it was positioned. And it won a couple of awards. I mean, do you see Deck Nine's Twitter as well yesterday? I think they posted a graphic with all the awards and stuff they won, because obviously they missed out. For me, they missed out on the biggest one, which was going to be the BAFTAs. And it was a shame that they didn't win any for actor or supporting actor. But this was a good win for them. Obviously Deck Nine were very clear about the message we're sending about LGBTQ plus, and for them to win, it's a good moment. And in itself as well, like Authentic Representation, Best LGBTQ Character of Alex Chen. They were on the money with them. They didn't miss the heartbeat with this.
Now, I will say, one little side thing. Unpacking, Best LGBTQ indie game, well deserved. That was a fantastic game and a really well told story about that sort of struggle. So good for Unpacking on that. And I'm very happy for Life is Strange True Colors for getting Game of the Year for Gaming Magazine. And I would like to be in that perspective, just saying wow, they really hit the nail on the head. But this really puts it into perspective, because I don't know that perspective. I'm just a straight white guy. I don't know it at all. In fact, the EP I'm writing right now for music, it's a story about a couple, but they're straight, because that's my perspective. I think to do it any differently would be kind of I don't know that struggle, so why can I speak on it? But for them to actually hit the nail on the head, know the struggles of the LGBTQ and represent it correctly in a very authentic sort of way. And now that's what made Schitt's Creek such a beautiful show, is because it hit the nail on the mark instead of making it more of a comedic, side character, like the gay character. It was the story. So it looks like they did a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of authentic conversations with each other to say, how can we represent this community in the best light. And, they succeeded with Game of the Year. Now, it seems like the readers, though, chose Resident Evil Village, but, the committee for gaming was for True Colors. And I think that's all that matters, I guess.
That readers was a bit strange, because does it just mean generally the game that you like the most, or is it about LGBT representation? Because I don't think there's any in Resident Evil Village off the top of my head.
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe it's, again,
I think it's a universal readers poll decision of what was your favorite game of the year, not necessarily LGBT related.
It, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really. Again, I'm not within that community. I am familiar with the community, but just I don't know what goes into that. But I'm glad that True Colors was recognized for the authenticity that was put into place. Yeah.
Yeah, it deserved it. They made a point about them really kind of hammering home the kind of we are going to focus on these themes. These themes are going to be important to the story. They give you that kind of fact with the character of Alex having different choices of how you want her love dynamic unfolding, whether it's with Ryan, whether it's with Steph, whether it's being on her own. Obviously, the Wavelengths DLC in itself, with there's the entire LGBT colors are there for some of the scenes they were really emphasizing on pride. in itself. Like Steph is like pretty much like, you know, that they went even, we had an inkling about her sexuality in Before the Storm, but they've kind of like really fleshed out and gone full on here and be like, we're pretty much clear about where this is going. Like, you know, open representation. They had a trans character in there. So yeah, they deserved this, and it's a good recognition for Deck Nine to win this award.
Yeah. I mean, congratulations. Good for them. I'm happy that, you know, Life is Strange is continuing to be a series that focuses on representation and focus on educating the general public on, you know, what each community goes through.
Indeed. So we shall move on to our next topic. So we're going to stick with the Life is Strange 2 Colors developer Deck Nine. So Deck Nine seems to have had a recruitment drive recently. On Twitter, They were dropping quite a few recruitment of people to the studio. So let me just run you through a couple of people who have been hired there. This was in the May period, from like 11th of May onwards, that they've been announcing it through Twitter. They have been saying that there've been like more announcements that are going to be coming. So they announced that Kelsey, who worked in several years in administration and project management, she is now being hired at Deck Nine as a junior producer.
I think it's pronounced Lakowski.
What's that?
I think her last name is pronounced Lakowski.
Oh, Kelsey Lakowski.
Yeah.
Lakowski, yeah. I'm going to say Lakowski. That's the American part. I'm going to get you for that. So in that as well, they also announced that Giselle Francis has been hired as a narrative designer. There's another person there. She previously worked as a game writer for Red Thread Games. We also have another announcement that Elizabeth Ballou has joined Deck Nine as a narrative designer. She previously worked on projects for Studio Dry Dock. And
also, I appreciate her fun facts on Elizabeth's fun facts. What does it say?
I'll let you read it out.
Fun fact about Elizabeth Ballou. I guess Ballou. She has 2 garbage sons, aka her cats, and plays too much Crusader Kings 3 and loves to knit. I love that, garbage sons.
You can't. And then we also have Kira McCloon. McCloon, I'm gonna say.
I think it's McCallum. McCallum. Whatever.
We could actually do a podcast to just try to pronounce people's names. It'd be one of the greatest podcasts. But yeah, she's been hired as an office manager for Deck Nine. So she previously worked in QA for Deck Nine. So that's how you get the position. You know, you have past experience. So they've had like a big recruitment drive. Also Deck Nine, if you want to, you know, if you want someone else to be hired there, and also Dontnod Montreal, call me as well. I'm open to opportunities.
Trying to get my hand into the music industry. So, you know, if you like the music that comes out, the EP comes out and you like it, just, you know, hit your boy up, you know.
Yeah. But no, actually, on a serious note, this is really, you know, when they're announcing this on Twitter, they're not keeping quiet about how big the studio is becoming. The studio is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, we know that they are working on The Expanse with Telltale Games. So studio's going to get bigger and bigger, and whatever else they're working on, you know, more talent coming in. And it's big news for Deck Nine. Like, you know, that this kind of like collaboration with Square Enix has put them on a trajectory where they can try and build themselves to be a bigger developer. You know, not every developer gets an opportunity to work on established IPs, franchises, and Deck Nine has really taken the scruff of the neck and gone with it. Whether you like their games or not, that's a different debate. But like for Deck Nine, this is an opportunity which lets them venture out into other things. Like, you know, most people never would expect them to be working The Expanse with Telltale, and like them having that opportunity means that they can work on those other projects, they can hire more people, they can get more games out there. They don't have to just have a specific relationship with Square Enix and pumping out Life is Strange games. So I'm buzzing for them. Obviously, more and more talent will probably be announced at some point on this as well. I just realized as well, Kira's fun fact is that she lived in 10 different cities in the last 2 years.
I saw that. I was like, holy crap. I lived in 5 cities in 5 years, and I thought that was bad, but 10 cities in 2 years, like, God,
that's wild.
How does that happen?
Do you know what? That's something that always surprised me. Like when you guys moved yourself, like, you know, how much Americans move from like city to city, state to state. Like, I don't know. I always imagine that people would stay like rooted in one place, but like it seems to be a thing in America where people move.
I would say it's like 50-50. I know a lot of people who like stay, especially Pennsylvanians, where I come from. Pennsylvanians are very stubborn that they're going to stay there. Like they're rooted in that. Whereas like people who live in the Midwest, I think, which is where I am now, I see a lot of moving Midwesterners like, oh, I'm from Michigan, I'm from Wisconsin, I'm from Minnesota. And they just move around the Midwest. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just like too much. But yeah, like I would say it's like a 50-50. People are sometimes rooted, people just move around. There's a lot to see in our country. It's a big country.
It is a big country, my God.
Yeah,
a big country. But I don't have anything else to add to the recruitment of Det and I kind of just wanted to give that a bit of a shout out because I feel like this. I think it just gives you an inkling about where
Yeah, all women too.
All women.
Yeah, going back to our other topic. Yeah, but that's it. That's all I have. And also garbage sons. I'm going to use that for my dog.
Garbage sons.
My garbage son.
Okay, so we will move into our next topic, which will be our final one before our main topic. And this was big news. I completely forgot about this. So this week, we are recording the 21st of May, and on the 19th of May, the Dontnod Twitter account tweeted, "This week marks the 7th anniversary of the release of episode 3 Chaos Theory of Life is Strange." That took me back.
That's too long ago. Like that's
that took
too
me.
long. Although it doesn't feel, you know what? In my mind, I feel like it was longer ago. Like that's the sad part, because I've moved so many times and I've lived a lifetime in 5 years. I'm just like, it was only 7 years.
It's wild. I was thinking about this. I moved from a video game industry where I was like working in that industry to a sports one. I moved from jobs to jobs. I had less white hairs back then. The game Life is Strange was coming out in 2015. Like, you know, it's so weird.
I wasn't even married yet. Oh my God. I wasn't even married.
It's weird because obviously like my remembering of Life is Strange episode 3 was a bit more, you know, it's there because I played the remaster collection recently. But like I was just thinking, because I remember seeing the anniversary date and looking at it. This was the first professional review I ever wrote for a publication. Yeah. It's like 2015 when I was working at Hardcore Games. This is the first ever review I submitted for that website. Which was episode 3 episode 3 Chaos Theory. You know, I took over from the Life is Strange series at that point. I think the other writer left at that point. So I was like writing from episode 3, 4, 5, and then I did the main season review. But like I did that, and that was my first professional review. It was so strange about it. And I went back and read the review as well. I was like, oof. Like, this is that rating. The writing is dated now. So I feel like I've come a long way since then. But yeah, I was like, it felt like for me, it was a really important like landmark episode this as well, because like I really kind of was invested in Life is Strange this year when I was working in that industry. I was like writing so much news on it. I was doing reviews, and then on top of that, you know, I would have the opportunity to review the series professionally. All these reviews are on Metacritic that I wrote about Life is Strange, and with that as well, like this span out as much as it has, and like, you know, 7 years later, like I'm doing a podcast on my own YouTube channel for it as well. So it's just like such an important landmark of it. And do you want to take a guess what I gave Life is Strange episode 3 Chaos Theory? So it's a 10 point scale, but it's done in like 1.5 to
1 like bullocks and 10 is stunning.
Stunning. It'll be stunning masterpiece.
I don't think you gave it a 1 bullocks.
It's a 10 point scale, but it's done like 1.5 to 2.53. Would you like to take a guess where it's at?
If it's a 10 point scale, I'm going to say you gave it it's 0.5s, right?
Yes.
I'm in between 7.5 and an 8. I think you gave it either a 7.5 or an 8.
Just to emphasize, so my scale will be like from 0 to 5, so it'll be 0, 0.5, 1, all the way like that. So the review I gave it was a 4.5 out of 5.
Oh, 4.5 out of 5. So it was close. Yeah.
Yeah, very close, yeah.
Yeah.
I only ever give one episode a full 5. That's the only ever game I ever gave 5 score out of when I was reviewing a Hardcore Game. I think I did 20 plus reviews, only gave one episode. And it was Life is Strange episode. I believe it was episode 2. Rules.
Good choice. Yeah.
Life is Strange 2.
Oh, wait, rules? Wait, yeah. Life is Strange 2 rules. You gave that a 5?
Yeah, because Cassidy turned up in it. I think I wrote like 3 paragraphs about Cassidy turning up. I was like, wow. I was like, look at Life is Strange. What do you mean?
What do you mean? Like the worst episode.
That has like Chris coming in it. It's great.
Yeah, that's great. No, because Chris's comeback into it was so inconsistent. They changed voice actors. For some reason, his dad wasn't drunk anymore.
No, they didn't change his voice actor.
They didn't? It sounded different.
No, that's Chandler. Yeah, but he's young, God. Remember? Because like when I spoke to him, remember when I spoke to him on Life After Strange?
Yeah.
You know, his voice is changing constantly. Like, he didn't really sound like Chris.
But, like, what happened to his dad? He was drunk off his ass, but then, like, all of a sudden he can give his son a piggyback ride? What the hell was that about? But
well, he's accepting the fact that he's a lone father, you know, has to step up and, like, not be that much of an alcoholic.
Just like, he drank an entire bottle of whiskey, like, not even 5 minutes before that scene. And he's just like, Adam, I had a realization, so I'm sober.
Adam, Cassidy singing First Aid Kit for that very Bruce scene is a 5 out of 5 scene for me. Like, that was like one of the best introductions for a Life is Strange character, and she's a great character.
And I feel bad because I know Michelle and Luke watch this podcast, and I'm like,
yeah, hopefully I'm following you.
Their creation. So I know when my EP comes out, they're going to my second track, like, oh, your second track was like fucking awful. It was Spollux. I hate it, even though they're not English, they're French. I don't know what French people say. It was baguettes. I don't know. It's just whatever.
They made a great game. You just don't like Life is Strange 2, and you're a hater.
I will replay it. I will replay it.
Great game. Anyone who was watching this and you love Life is Strange 2, I'm a Life is Strange 2 stan, and I stand with you as well with that. Great episode, and it deserved 5 out of 5 for me as well. So let's just leave it at that. But back onto Chaos Theory. Chaos Theory is probably one of the best episodes in all of video games. It's probably the best middle episode I've ever played in a video game of like that old 5-episode structure. And like, my God, it was so entertaining. It was like so good. Like going back and playing when I was playing in the remaster collection, it just felt like so surreal. And then obviously when you get that like nice little twist at the end with like Chloe, with Max turning up and Chloe's disabled and she's in the wheelchair, I was like, oh shit. I was like, what have I done here?
I know, that's all I keep thinking when you play that episode. It's just like, oh damn it. It's just like, what happened here? But no, it's such a crazy, and then of course the follow-up episode was just a train wreck of emotions. But no, Chaos Theory was just a fantastically written piece of episode ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really just hit the beat on like, because I always find like when you play the episodic structure, like the third episode always seems to lag a little bit. It's kind of like filled with like a lot of filler content. It really doesn't go there. That one was like kind of constantly going in between everything else, and then it really sets up this really insane cliffhanger ending. Like, oh damn, it's like I've actually gone here. It's like, you know, and you have that's like your first real introduction to William Price as well, when he comes in, he's like there being really playful and like just like this really fun-loving like figure to Chloe. And towards Max, so it's like it's so cool just seeing that. And I genuinely was like, I was like hooked on it from start to finish. And like you said, the episode that followed it, Dark Room, is just insane. And I think even Chrysalis is a little bit underappreciated. I think because the endings were a little bit polarizing. I think that's a great episode as well. But it's hard. I think episode 3 might even be one of the best episodes in the series. I think maybe 1 for me probably eclipses it a bit. I think the first episode is just really, really one of the most insane introductory like openings to any. Yeah,
I almost didn't play the game until I went 20 minutes into episode 1. Like I played like a little bit. I'm like, I don't think this game's for me. But then I gave it another shot. And I'm like, oh, whoa, hang on here. It's just like it's a really cool episode. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and it's insane to think that's been 7 years since that's come out. I couldn't believe it.
Freaking insane. Time flies, man. Time flies when you're getting old.
Yeah, too old. So I think we will move into our next topic, and this is our final topic. It's our main topic. So we're doing our topic segment, which is going to be what we want to see in the future of a Life is Strange game, and how could the series evolve. This is a fan topic submitted by LangstonSpeaks. Commented on a YouTube video a while ago, and I showed Adam, and Adam was like, that's a sick topic. And I'm like, yeah, it's a sick topic. So, you know, if you ever do want topic ideas and like suggestions for things for us to cover, you know, do leave them in the comments. Like we'll happily put them in. Might not be next week, might not be the month after, but we have like a list of like things we want to talk about, because we've got an entirety, like, you know, as much as we're here, we can talk about as much as we can. So thank you, LangstonSpeaks, for that topic. So we're going to cover that on this one. This is really interesting, because I feel like it's so that this comes straight after the Hannah episode, because me and Hannah were talking about what we want to see in Life is Strange. series in the future. And like, I think that there's so much potential there, because this is why I was like a little bit when I played True Colors, I was a bit like, you know, a bit like my head down, because I was like, there was great moments and it was so fun, but then it went too safe. It reminded me of Force Awakens on like Star Wars, that new Star Wars series, which I hate, that new trilogy. But it was like Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams going back to like, almost like George Lucas's Star Wars A New Hope, and like really copying and like kind of like showing this kind of like weird, like, you know, sort of like really safety point. I was like, it just doesn't, it's like not really changing anything. And that's what I felt with like True Colors. It went that safety route where it's like there was so much. If you played Life is Strange 1, you'd expect to see half the stuff that actually happened in True Colors, which was like that. But for me, I will start off with saying I wanted to see a new protagonist in the next game. I want to keep it a new protagonist in each game, unless you up until the point we get to an Avengers scenario where we can bring all the protagonists back. But I want to see a new protagonist come in, and I'd like them to go back to a two-figure structure. So we have Max and Chloe, Sean and Daniel. I'd like to see it two-way dynamic. I don't think three-way works. I think Ryan, Ryan, Steph, and Alex Chen was too much. That triangle really like overlapped too much, because I think like this is where my disappointment came from. Because I remember thinking like I went for the scenario in True Colors where you have Steph and Alex being together as that kind of dynamic, and I think that was a bit disappointing because I felt like the story didn't really flesh out the way that I wanted. It almost like seemed sometimes it's like telling you to go with Ryan, sometimes it's telling you with Katie, sometimes it's telling you to go with Steph, sometimes it's telling you to go with Steph, and it was like it was
we need
kind
to
of
bring on Dan Hutton for an episode. I feel like we're
So it was, you know, like when you have that, it never really had a clear cut direction. And that's probably because they wanted the multiple choice options. But I feel like I want to go with two character structure. I wouldn't even mind being a man and a woman this time. Like, if anything, like a male and a female character, instead of just being two females or two male characters. I think that personally, I'd like to see, starting with the characters, if anything, is to go back to a two dynamic. I don't know how you feel about that.
I'm half and half on it. I think a three person dynamic can work, but I don't think I don't think it worked in True Colors. I think the selection of like who you go with, I think it did well with representation, because I don't think, okay, so if it's, you know, only an LGBTQ option, I don't think we should really say like, oh, the straight people are left behind. I'm like, well, the LGBTQ community has been left behind for many, many years. So if the straight community gets left behind on an option, ooh, boo-hoo. But I think it can work in a way of like a trio dynamic. Like, I think it works with how to get information out of Diane. I think that's the way it worked in that sort of way. I think it works in a way of just like coming up with options, like which path are you going to take? Like, each of them has an idea, and each of them is on your side, right? And you have to select. It's almost like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. But in terms of romantic dynamic, I don't think it really worked in that way. But what were we about to say?
No, I just think it's hard, because like
it is hard.
The only other free way you can do it is Rachel, Chloe, and Max. And Rachel, because she's just kind of mentioned repeatedly in the first episode, like in the first game, she's repeatedly mentioned. She's just there. She's the, I always say that Chloe's the conduit to Max and Rachel. Like, Max and Rachel never meet, but they have that connection because of Chloe. And you see like there's almost like, you imagine what the scenario would be with those three characters in the room together, but then I think it would lead to confusion, chaos, and all this other stuff, because like you're focusing too much on three characters. When you have two characters, you have a lot of time to flesh them out. Go back to Life is Strange 2, Daniel and Sean. Then at the same time, you bring in other characters. You bring like a love interest like Cassidy or Finn. They come in for only an episode, and then they disappear. It's constantly about the two brothers. Same with Life is Strange 1, about the two girls like Max and Chloe. So there's always a kind of, for me, the balance is there. I think with True Colors, you have this balance of like Alex, Ryan, and Steph in this triangle, and constantly it's like trying to push everything in it. I'm a bit like, I just don't know if there's the balance is there, because like they're trying to open the love interest routes up. Because like, remember, actually I'll bring that up in a separate topic, because I think it's a bit controversial.
Yeah, like, no, in story writing, it is pretty difficult to get like three people in. And plug in again for my EP that's coming up hopefully in July. There is a story involved in the EP I'm writing, and I thought, like I said, it's going to be involved a couple, and I was thinking of even adding a third character, like a young child, into the mix, but like writing that in is just so difficult. That was just like, no, they don't have a kid. It's just a couple, because like I tried to write in a third character, and I'm just like, I like this dynamic of two. And I think in writing, the dynamic of two always works because it is a dynamic. It's a duality. It is it's a sort of like yin and yang of your writing. Whereas you add in a third, it does work in a way of like, if you make it into a trifecta, like each one affects another person, but then it kind of traps you into this kind of a lock loop in a sort of way, where each interaction has to encounter another interaction. So it is kind of like a difficult thing to do in writing standards. But if you hire the right person, if you hire the right narrative designer, in the way that Montreal is hiring, where they're more looking at like, what do you bring to the table, not where did you study, but like, have you ever written 3 people before? I think it can work, and I think a skilled professional writer can do it. Am I a professional skilled writer? No, not in any sort of means, which is why I stick with a duality kind of deal. But it is incredibly hard.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I think you can work the 3 character dynamic. I think in these video games, it seems almost too difficult to do it, because I'll be up there. Like I'm very surprised that that the series has leaned more towards LGBT since the Dontnod, the helming of it, especially in like Life is Strange 2. They've always dabbled in LGBT, but like it's more so with the Deck 9 games, if anything. But like for me, you won't see a trans lead character in Life is Strange. That's controversial in itself. No.
Well, like,
because
not Life is Strange, but it did happen in the Tell Me Why.
But this is where I'm going to make the case for it. So, in itself, we've seen obviously Steph's love interest, which was a trans character in True Colors. Doesn't get seen, but is mentioned repeatedly through there. And then on top of that, we also have in the Life is Strange comic series, we have trans characters, or one at least that I know of, where I'm up to in the series. But for a character to be in that lead role depends. There's a lot of where your opportunities of selling a game are limited, because, for example, Square Enix will sell this game everywhere. Like Life is Strange True Colors Wavelengths DLC is available in China. Yes. Now, I've never played that. It's on the PS Store. If someone wants to go and try out that, I would love to see what they actually keep in there. Because do you really think they keep the LGBT stuff in there? Do you really think they keep a lot of this stuff in there? And in itself, I'm arguing this because of, do you remember the Tibet flag that was shown in Life is Strange True Colors?
Right, yeah.
And the review bombing that happened on there. They've apparently changed the flag in that game. I don't know if they've changed it in the Western release, but someone posted on the Life is Strange subreddit a different image. So the flag has been changed. This is where, for example, with Dontnod, you can't argue against them, of like where, if when they're hitting hard on the themes in Life is Strange 2, they didn't change any of it. They didn't divert. They went even double down on like where they stood about, the wall, this representation, the racism. They were pretty much double down on like how heavy they really want to explore these themes. But like that's an example of it. This game is sold in China, for example. It's sold in a lot of markets. But then when you have Tell Me Why is developed by Dontnod, but who's bankrolling it? Microsoft. And it's on, and we've always talked about this as well. I've always said to you, it's always weird for me that Tell Me Why was a Microsoft exclusive. It never feels like the kind of game you'd expect to see on an Xbox, never get the kind of game you expect to see in a Games Pass, but it's there. And that's the reason, because Microsoft could take the risk with it and sell out this game. Because how many trans lead characters can you name to me in the last 10 years?
Oh, none. Like, that's why Tell Me Why was such an important game, because it was the first lead trans character.
Exactly. And like that's where my thing with like Life is Strange was, I don't think we'll see it. It would be interesting to see it. Obviously, it would be really interesting to see how you put a trans character into the lead role and what you'd explore. That'd be interesting just in the amount of social and political issues you could talk about with that character in the game and where they'd be in the story. They'd be interesting. But I think because of like where the position of the game is sold, where it's marketed, everything else like that, the sales would never hit where it would expect to be, because you'd have to do it. Same with like Disney. You see it with Disney all the time. They're always like, oh, look, we introduced this LGBT character in the Star Wars game and Star Wars film and everything else. And then, oh no, wait, they're being removed from the Chinese release of the film and theatrical release. And it's like, people are always stunned by this kind of response on Twitter and stuff. And I'm like, like, what do you expect? It's the same with all these companies that change their promotional branding to LGBT colors, and then they're still selling Saudi Arabia, and they're still selling all these other countries where anyone from an LGBT
Nintendo,
background.
I don't know if you saw this,
don't.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia now owns 5% of Nintendo.
Yeah, I can't wait for Mohammed bin Salman to get bloody Bowser into the Saudi kingdom. We'll see how that goes. Because I like that, and I stand very strongly in my views on Saudi Arabia, on China, Qatar, all these countries, with the way that they treat things. And I will never, ever let anyone call me out on this podcast, because I've always been critical about where Dontnod's position is with Tencent. I've always stood very firmly on these kind of views. I've stand firm on the views of, you know, the same with like Disney and stuff like that. If you're introducing a character that has LGBT, don't preach something and then say you're supporting the community and then not, you know, then you're doing this instead. You're saying, oh yeah, well, we're going to release it in China, but we're going to, like, you know, take this part of the game out. And the same with this Tibet flag for a scenario, for example. Chinese people can be angry all they want for like what it is, like, you know, and there's a big history between China and Tibet, but like, you know, don't back down from what you're sending a message from, because if you're going to do it, commit to it. And like, that's why, for me, I feel like it's controversial, because like, I don't want anyone to be disheartened, and I hope I get proven wrong by it. But I don't think you'll see a trans character in the lead role of a Life is Strange game. I would be sitting here shocked.
Well, that's why it's kind of sucks to have this sort of platform you have, because here's the thing: a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, you use your platform for good." Sometimes you can't. You can't use your platform for good, which is why a lot of indie games get away with a lot of different, let's say, controversial themes, because they don't have somebody breathing over their neck saying you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, people won't play it here. Oh, people won't play it there. Which is why a lot of people go indie. And so I see a lot of studios, like a lot of studio heads, leave their studios to go indie so that they can spread a different message. And that's the thing.
The first Life is Strange was like that. I always kind of see it as like an indie AAA game. It's bankrolled by Square Enix, but it has such an indie aesthetic from Dontnod, you can tell. And they even said it was difficult for them to sell the game with 2 female leads. Like, you know, and it almost like kind of plays into that when Max is always like, you know, it's Max, not Maxine. It's always difficult to sell it when you're bringing in a established franchise. You're trying to sell anything, and you bring in certain kind of things that don't appeal to what marketing does. Then it's difficult. Like, you bring in a trans character. How do you sell into Middle Eastern countries? How do you sell into other countries that you need sales from? And it's a difficulty. Like, you and you slowly see like Life is Strange. It's good because it brings in a lot of representation. For example, in the comics. I talked to Emma Vicelli about this. You know, they had Pixie in there. She's wearing a hijab. You know, drumsticks. You know, she has jokes about. But like, you know, there's a kind of representation with it. But you know, I was very surprised that we even saw a trans character in True Colors. That was like the big surprising point for me. But we didn't actually physically
see her. We saw a recording if you found the right thing within the game. It's like an Easter egg.
And again, I haven't played the Chinese version. Imagine if we play for the Chinese version. Do we think we'll see her in there, in like any mention of her?
They can take out that Easter egg. They can take away that. I think it was a button. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing. They can easily just take that.
I think you click on the button. It has her voice playing.
Yes. It's like a staple button. You find it. I think you find it in the garden, and you hear her voice and all that. And I think there's a piece of writing as well. But these are little Easter eggs they can simply slip out, and that's it. And that's the thing. Going back to my original point, I think, you know, in Life is Strange games, we want more audiences to play these games. We wanted to get bigger. We wanted to get a lot more eyes on it. But here's the double-edged sword on that. The more eyes that are on it, the less representation you can give in your games. You know, the more mainstream it becomes, the more mainstream it becomes. You know, it kind of sucks. You know, especially again, you know, going back to music. That's why a lot of people stay indie, even in the music industry, because you can't really spread a message. You know, when you sign with a record deal, it's terrible. In fact, little side story. Little side story. One of my favorite artists is Half an Orange. Great artist. Go check them out. Half an Orange. You know, they're pretty big artists. So it's like, oh, have you checked them out? But you know, they just reached 50 million Spotify streams. 50 million Spotify streams, and they put a message on Twitter saying that, like, we gave our demo to 20 different record labels, record labels, and they all dismissed them because they're like, nobody's going to listen to your music. Nobody's going to listen to your music. Now they have 50 million. So it's just kind of like the more mainstream you become, the more cookie cutter you got to become. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there, where do we really want Life is Strange to be owned by Square Enix? Do we want it to be sold off? And when people say like, oh, we don't want it to be sold off, I think you kind of do. I don't think you want Square Enix to be handling Life is Strange IP, because the less representation you'll get.
Well, yeah, it's hard because in itself, like I have to defend Square Enix in the sense that it's like they have introduced trans characters in there. They're given the platform to take over characters, but they're limited because they're a third party publisher that's going to want to sell it into as many markets as possible.
That's what I mean.
And
it's so limited. Yeah,
yeah, and it's like it's hard about that. It's like, I'm going to give you another example in terms of like, I work in the sports field, but like, recently a gay footballer came out, young 17-year-old. Everyone's admiring it, and I admire him as well for coming out. It's going to be, you're essentially putting yourself in the firing line because there are people that won't like you for who you are. But all these people are praising this person, and I'm praising him as well. But then I'm seeing that these people are also seeing that the World Cup is being held in Qatar this year for football, soccer, and it's like, where's the standard for this? Where's the hypocrisy of this? Like, why can't you sit there? Why are you championing one thing and then saying this is all right for another thing? It's same with like Life is Strange. Like, I sit there and champion a lot of things, but I wouldn't sit here and say, that I'm. I wouldn't sit here on this podcast saying like, I support loads of trans people and everything else. Like, I give all my things, and then next minute I put this podcast out in Saudi Arabia, clip the clip out of it, and then put it out there. And it's like, how is that dignified? If you're angry with me supporting someone who's trans, then dislike this video. Like, you have every right to dislike this video, but I'm not going to sit there and say, oh yeah, I'd like to see a trans character in the video game, which I think would be possible. But then in itself, it would hurt Square Enix's sales because they couldn't post it in these other countries. How are you going to cut out the main protagonist of the game?
Yeah, exactly. So the way I like, going back to the original topic, like where do we want the future to be in Life is Strange? Honestly, I wanted to be less mainstream. I wanted to be more indie. I wanted to give to a studio that will actually like not have a studio breathing over them, or care that it's being sold in China. Don't sell in China then.
I think that'll be a popular opinion with people who are listening to this. I think they'll agree with that. I think that whilst it's getting more mainstream, and this True Colours felt so much more mainstream, it's losing that special magic that was around the first two Life is Strange, around BTS. Mm-hmm. It just kind of seems to be the series now that's trying to be mainstream. It doesn't need to be mainstream. It doesn't need to be a blockbuster hit. It just needs to be a successful series, which is what it is. So I feel like I might have gone down the rabbit hole there, and I might have offended a lot of people, might lose subscribers, but I feel like it was an important conversation to be had. I would like to see a trans character in a leading role in Life is Strange. There are trans characters in Life is Strange, but in a leading role, I just don't think it's going to be possible, which is a big shame as well. Would you like to get my controversial take now at this point?
Can I say no?
Yes.
It's like you're the
but you'll still get it though.
Exactly. Like, I love when people ask that question, like, do you mind if I ask you a question? No, I'm gonna ask you anyway.
That's what I usually do, but yeah, I'm gonna give it you now. So it was hedging on what you were saying before about the free character dynamic, about a lot of things. I would prefer the next Life is Strange to get rid of any love interest dynamic completely. It felt forced in True Colours. I don't like it. It was never important in the first Life is Strange necessarily. It wasn't there as an option. So, God, I can see your face.
No, I'm just giving you shit. I don't really care.
So, no, but look at here. So, in the first Life is Strange one, it's there in the sense that Chloe loves Rachel. Chloe loves Max. Max loves Chloe. It's never a huge focus of the entire game. Like, there's an option where you can kiss each other in the bedroom. And then in between that, you see this kind of like connection of these two people who obviously love each other. It's all this. And then in Life is Strange 2, you get the option of a love interest between Cassidy and Finn. Cassidy and Finn. Then in True Colours, you get the option between being strictly, friends between these characters, love interest with Steph, love interest with Ryan. I would prefer them to just go down the road where you get rid of all of it and you have a character that doesn't need to have any kind of love interest. And I emphasize that point on either they could go down a very radical route of being like going to kind of this idea about one character potentially being asexual, which doesn't mean you can't have, you can't have a love interest, but you could try and explore asexuality in a character. How many video game characters do we really explore with asexuality, if ever? And then on top of that, the other kind of one I always see, which has been a bit more prevalent in my mind, is Aloy, for example. In both Horizons, she doesn't have a love interest. Mm-hmm. She has no moments of like you know, having, oh, you know, I'm romantically involved. Maybe there was a bit more in the recent one, but they didn't really go into that. I think they intentionally just made it that they were close friends. But there's never a love interest for Aloy. She doesn't live the route of like, oh, she's going to meet someone, she's going to fall in love in the battlefield and all this stuff. It just, for me, sometimes seems like when you watch a film, you watch a game, you watch TV, it's like, why can't these two people just be friends? Why can't they just be like, you know, why can't this character just go down a story which is really fascinating but doesn't have to have a love interest in it? Like, why is that always a selling point for me? I feel like it just hammers down on like almost any kind of medium where it's like, yeah, let's have a love interest in this character. Let's commit to it. It's like you go like look at 1,500 blockbuster franchises. You'll see it all the time. Assassin's Creed, XYZ, ABC, all these games all have it. And there's no kind of like, you know, some of the characters like I wish that there was this kind of option where it's like it's not always there. Like, you know, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake, when I play that, I love that. I love the fact that Cloud's a little bit like, you know, he's so oblivious about it. You have two love interests where like Tifa and Aerith really like you could kind of be there, but it's kind of like it's never really gone down the road of like, oh, they're going to hook up or they're going to be like this kind of character. I would like to be bold enough to say that I would like to see a Life is Strange game that doesn't even try and touch that territory. It goes down a completely different route.
Yeah. No, I agree with the statement, which is why I was trying to like make sure I was right on what I'm gonna say. Because you know it would be bad as a Christian and a former pastor that if I didn't know the names of these two in the Bible, I was like, oh, I got it right. Thank God. No, like, and I love the dynamic of just a solid friendship. And I think it goes a lot into the Greek language of what love is. And there's, I believe there's 5 or 6 different meanings of love. Of course, we sometimes mean romantic love, but then there's also a brotherly love. There is a kind of like just a friendship kind of love. And I remember there's a controversy like within Bible college, you know, like there's a dynamic in the Bible with David, which, you know, everybody knows David and Goliath, but his homeboy Jonathan, and they're like together, they're homeboys, they're always hanging out, they're hugging each other, and they're like, was that the first gay relationship in the Bible? You know, like, and they're just talking about like, oh, like there's gay in the Bible, blah blah blah, and I'm just like, I think we're missing that dynamic that like not all relationships need to be about romantic love. Like David and Jonathan were like tight homeboys, you know. Jesus and Lazarus, who died in the cave, you know, who was dead, and that's where we get the story's first. Jesus wept, you know, like because they were homeboys, they were solid, you know. And I think a dynamic of just like a strong bond of, you know, a lot of people say bromance, and that's fine. Say whatever you want. But I think there's a stronger dynamic for that, rather than just romantic love. Not everything needs to be romantic love. You know, sometimes it can be just a solid friendship, and that's still love. That's still love, and it's just not romantic sense.
And sorry to interrupt that, because that's a good point, and it's a great story to tell. Because wouldn't that be the point of the first Life is Strange, with Chloe and Max?
Totally.
Because they get. I'm sorry, they get a lot gayer in the comics, like the kissing. They like there's a lot of romantic connection in the comics where you can see it, the Vicelli comic series, and that's it. But what I'm saying in the sense, like what I mean, like getting a lot more gayer in the comic series, is that they show that there's having established this entire story before, that they're now kind of like, you know, there could be a relationship, there's something more meaningful. But I always took the kind of interpretation from the first Life is Strange is maybe they could be romantically involved, but it's the connection they share. There's this kind of like such a love deeping kind of thing about you, where it's like you'd give this life for someone, you could sacrifice an entire town to save this person, not because you're necessarily married to them or engaged them, but because you share this kind of like deep emotional connection with someone that just understands you. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring your point in it, because like, isn't that like the crux of the first Life is Strange? They never, like as I said, look, the choice is never there. It's like, oh yeah, you know, you can even kiss Warren, for example, later on in the game.
Kiss Warren every time, yeah. Every playthrough, I kiss Warren, and I destroy Chloe, and I save the dog. Like that's my playthrough. I am Team Warren, Team Pompidou, every time.
See that's what I mean. Like there's never a thing with Max. Like the entire point is like, oh, she's not just straightly gay, or she's like this. There's this kind of interpretation to be opened there. And I feel like that's what for me is always interesting. Again, my favorite game, like, you know, Metal Gear Solid 1, like they have that with Snake. You know, someone else is in love with him, but he doesn't really show that to someone else. He feels like emotionally strong with someone. Right. He might feel emotionally connected with people. And the same with Clout Strife, you feel emotionally connected with people, but it's never like a glitzy, glammy kind of like, ooh, you know, we're going to be hooked up and lovey and all this. This is why I prefer Life is Strange 2, for example. There's even an argument I'm thinking just recently before coming on to record this podcast that Life is Strange 2 could be the best Life is Strange in the entire series. Because like, even with that, when you get to episode 3 Wastelands, don't worry, that episode's coming when you're going to play those games. Oh, fireworks. But there's even an argument about it, because like, look how that love angle works. You only see them for one episode, and then they get rid of them because it's like, Dontnod are like, that's not the story. This is an interesting part of this boy's evolution, Sean's involvement of being a young man who's like interacting with a woman or a man for the first time, exploring his sexuality. But pulls it back in. This is the story. Sean and Daniel get back on track with it. You're the big brother. Yeah. So it kind of reverts the story back onto its track. It has this kind of like side splinter where it's like you can have this kind of explore Sean a bit more of like who he is, sexuality and stuff. But then it brings it back onto like this track. It's like, let's go down this way. This is the main story. And that's why I felt like even with the first Life is Strange, it's like, we bring this back in and we'll go and do that. Even True Colors to an extent was a bit like that, but then it kind of became a bit too lovey at the end of it. But I think like there's opportunity to explore with the characters. Like there's to bring in a protagonist where the story isn't about there's eventually a choice between love interest between man, woman, a trans character, whoever, like, you know, that I would prefer that being an option potentially.
Yeah, no, like, and that's the thing. I don't think relationships should be, I get the sentiment of making it an option for some people who want it to be, like, make it your game. But here's the thing about like game development is that like you can't get everybody's choice all at once. Yeah. You know, you can't predict everybody's options on everything that you develop. You know, sometimes you just need to focus in on one simple dynamic and, you know, make that the main thing, and it will become stronger rather than like spread yourself too thin in that sort of way. No, I agree with you all the way.
Yeah, I could be completely wrong. You could have a completely different opinion. Do leave it in the comments. I'd like to see what other people say. We have been proven many times to have, well, some people agree with us, some people don't. But yeah, like that's one of the ones that I want to kind of bring in. Another one would be that, and me and Hannah talked about this. I don't know if you actually watched that episode. You were meant to be there for the interview, but obviously... Yeah, that was a disaster. So we were actually recording on ZenCast last time. We're now currently on Riverside because we are trying to improve the video quality, the audio quality. So Riverside has actually gone for an hour and 20 minutes so far, not kicked Adam out. So
kicked me out.
We appreciate that. But me and Hannah talked about it was a character exploring mental health. So I would love for a character to have bipolar, to be maybe very evidently autistic, like a bit more. With Max, with me kind of talked about it, you know, we were talking about ADHD and autism. I'd like to see a character that explores some kind of like different perspective, someone who isn't neurotypical, bipolar, autism, ADHD, because like this is my kind of like burning grill with the series a little bit. It's like there's always this kind of emphasis on mental health being an important issue on certain things, like, you know, the Kate Marsh scene, which is always really important to a lot of people, really powerful scene in the first Life is Strange, other characters in between there, but then, you know, the representation of like Mac, for example, and then like the representation of like Nathan, for example, like, you know, these are kind of like, and I say this is in the sense that I was kind of a guy who watched The Joker only a couple of weeks ago, or months ago actually, and everyone raved about it. I watched it for the first time. Okay. I was like, I did not like this film at all. I really hated it so much. I was like, why are we making people who have any kind of, someone who is quote unquote different, treating them like they're maniac? They're not like that. It's like, it really winds me up because it's such an old stereotype, old dated. I just do not like seeing it. It's like, yeah, but then people be like, oh yeah, people are feeling sorry for the Joker. He's causing this kind of thing. He's doing this. I'm like, no, it's just poorly written. It's just poor. It's like you've descended the Joker down from this intricately great character who doesn't have to have some kind of mental health condition or anything, and then society needs to feel sorry for him, because you never see that. Look at the Heath Ledger Joker. That's incredible Joker. It's such a still great Joker, and it's like he plays games with people, and like even the Joker's backstory, one of the only really kind of like backstories of the Joker that we have is the Killing Joke. It's incredible. It's an incredible 60 plus pages of like of an origins character for a character that doesn't even need it, because the Joker is just meant to not be understood in the way that you expect to understand someone. And to kind of go back on this point, it's like, I want a character that has that exploration. Like me and Hannah were talking about, I said about Homeland. I love Homeland. The first 2 seasons of Homeland are some of the greatest TV I've ever seen. Carrie, the character in that, is bipolar. It's so fascinating to see it from her perspective. It's written so well, for me at least, knowing what I've seen. But I'd like a game to explore that kind of level of character where you have that being something that the character has to overcome with some, whether they consider it an adversity or not, whether you see something that kind of helps you understand who that character is, what they're going through. I think that is, like, for me, one of the essences of what would be very interesting about a Life is Strange game, especially in terms of, if we're just talking about protagonists. It would be different, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think like Alex Chen could have fit that role. Like she definitely could have. And I think they were kind of alluding to that she was a bit bipolar.
She's like Max. She's like Max. Like how different is it with Max?
No, yeah, exactly. They were both autistic characters, and I think it was like almost confirmed in the first one. You put a lot more research into the first one, so I don't want to take your research away from you, but
I didn't research it. But I looked. I think they allude to about that Max may have ADHD, or whether she is autistic. That's another interpretation. Me personally, the debate is out, but it's still obviously there. Like, they were writing a character with a specific intention in mind. Like, her mocap, for example. Look at the way she moves in the first Life is Strange. Her mocap is done in a specific way. Raul Barber and Michelle both spent time with Serena, making her walk in a room for 20 minutes to get Max's body mannerisms right. There's a reason for that. They were trying to stress something about her positioning. It's the first thing I noticed when I played Life is Strange 1. When you leave the hallway and you get into the hallway, she puts her headphones in. Yeah. And then she starts walking out. And I remember just thinking, I was like, this is a very, I don't know, it related so much to me, but I remember watching it, I was like, Max walks very interesting. And I'm like, and then I kind of like brushed it aside, and I was like, thinking all the other things that happen with Max, the way she's represented. I only found out people think Max is toxic, and I'm like, yeah. And then it's like, maybe you see it in that kind of perspective because you're seeing it in this kind of perspective. But yeah, to go back on your point, there was more opportunity with Alex Chen, I think.
Yeah, I think you could say it for more Alex Chen, but yeah, I definitely think there's more dynamics that we can represent in a Life is Strange game. Like we could do autism. There's a great podcast out there with a host who does have autism, and talks about their experience in a Life is Strange game. And I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. Adnan, what is the name of the podcast?
I think I know this podcast.
Wait, what is it? What is it?
Is it one that is it one that I told you about?
Yeah, the one you told me about.
Life After Bay.
Life After Bay, yes.
Yeah, Martin. Yeah, I know Martin.
Yeah.
Of course, he did. I was very admired when he named his podcast after me. I was like, the fact that he had this kind of, he went out and did. He went. Yeah, he dropped. Yeah, of course he did. Yeah, I think you mentioned the interview that you did with May. My
Ketty.
I hope I'm right, but my Ketty. But no, like I was proud that he went and did that podcast. He admits it himself in the podcast that he struggles with not scripting a conversation, but. I've listened to every single one of his podcasts. Like, I would listen to them. I've never said that to him, but I've listened to every single one. I know all the guests he's brought on there. I know he's spoken about the interviews I've done with, like, Hannah Pritchard and, like, representation. He gives you a very interesting perspective on it. So, like, if you want to hear it from someone's perspective like his, then definitely go and check it out. So it's like there's a... I always find that those kind of things are important to see with people. Like, with autistic people, they can be walking in society and you'll never notice them because they're just masking and they're just there. They are just, you never notice it. But like, this is what would be interesting because giving it to someone from a perspective who would be quote unquote neurotypical, to see an autistic person's representation on as a character, it would be great. And I had, I believe I had a conversation with someone who on the last Life is Strange, the last StrangeCast episode with Hannah. I believe his name was Jerome. He's a French person, and he spoke about how he was so happy hearing me and Hannah talk about autism and Max, and how it made him so happy hearing that he thinks that Hannah thinks that Max is autistic, and that how the representation of Samuel is like deeply autistic, and how Victoria bullies him. Like this is why I always find the first Life is Strange so intricately built. It's just not at face value when you look at all these characters. It's so built in, and this is why I'd love to see a main character maybe
like
even
build
give you a
on
bit
that dynamic
yeah, and give it
rather
if
than
we haven't
alluding to it. Mhm.
yeah if we allude to and alluding to it's very clever as well. I appreciate the fact that you allude to it because like it's not an easy selling point. Look at Max, look at the way she acts. Like you spend enough time around it, you would sit there thinking with Max being like, this is really interesting for representation of someone. It's just, you know, it's not just about, oh, she's not a girly kind of person, but there's a layer of complexity with Max, which makes her fascinating for me. And maybe you want to be a bit more obvious, like even in Homeland, like it's they're pretty much established that the character is bipolar, you know, Carrie, but with that, you find it so fascinating because you're like, oh, right, you know, and then people are like thinking she's crazy because she acts like this. She's not crazy. She's a normal person. I see this every time in society. I walk around the streets. Someone might be like doing something so unusual. I never look at them. In my head, I sometimes think I'm like, you know, and I will stare like gormlessly, like a twat sometimes, like because I'm the way that I am. But then I never judge people. I don't yell at them. I don't scream at them. If you want to go out there in society and dress up in a dress, then you power to you. Like, if you can do that, then you do that. I'm not going to. Who am I to interfere with your life? And I think that's where the conversation with the main character, I'd love them to really throw you a curve and give you a character where it's like you can see it from this. Like even Alex, there's probably conversations to be had with the way that she's done. Like there's intentionally, it's there. Like whatever they were trying to amplify through the character representation is there. But I'd like them just to be like upfront with it. How many video game characters have really like huge, you know, bipolar, autism, ADHD, any of this kind of thing? In the last 10 years, how many could you name off the top of your head?
I can't name any, honestly.
Yeah, it's the same with like trans characters. How many trans characters can you really name? Like how many LGBT characters can you really name off the top of your head? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it comes through your head, but it doesn't come through as much as you want. And these are kind of like stories that I like to explore a bit more, something that's a bit more interesting, something that's a bit different, something that's a bit, you know, we can watch it and see someone else's perspective. Like, you know, I don't live that perspective of someone's life who's, you know, the college hunk who's like, you know, generic and like, you know, I don't live those lives. So I'd like to see Life is Strange in the kind of umbrella of a series it is to kind of explore those kind of ideas.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I don't really have a lot going on for me that needs representation. You know, like it's like, oh, a musician has depression. It's like, oh, surprise. But like, you know, that's the only thing I have for me. But like, really, straight white guy, and I am hella white. I took a DNA test hoping I have some dynamic. It said 99.9% European. I was like, awesome. So nothing interesting about me at all. So it's just kind of like one of those things where it's just like, I don't really have a lot for me to be like thinking about in terms of like what can represent me other than, you know, depression. But even that, it's like, it's pretty well represented in most games, I think, and most television, and most music too.
Well, how good is it represented though, based on your opinion?
Based on my opinion, I think especially in TV shows, no, because it needs to be dramatic in that way.
Go on.
No, I was just gonna say it's like most TV shows. It's kind of like, you know, like, oh, I have depression, and it's just like it's kind of like they have to announce it. Whereas you know, a lot of people, you know, he didn't think they had depression. I mean, I don't mean to like, you know, use him as an example, but everybody was incredibly shocked that Robin Williams took his life. You know, he had suicidal thoughts, he had depression, and it's just like, I would have never thought of it. And it's like most people you don't think have suicidal thoughts, you know, whereas it's not like the sort of like I think about suicide on the daily. It's just like nobody says that, you know, nobody says that, but it is what it is.
No, I know, and the Robin Williams and Chester Bennington, both those would like those hit home. Like, I don't know, because I grew up in the 90s. You know, Robin Williams for an actor and Chester Bennington for Linkin Park. It was just unbelievable when that happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like, there's no face to it. And this is what I always say to people: like, there's no face for autism. There's no face for bipolar. It's like one of the most offensive things you can say to someone. You know, one of the most offensive things you can say to someone like an autistic person is that you don't look autistic. Like, how offensive is that? Like, and this is the thing with like those kind of. Watch a TV show, a film, look at the thing that we just talked about with Dontnod Montreal and recruiting a gender balance and kind of like, well, getting some kind of gender equality with our opinions. I don't agree with that fact that anyone can write any character. I could sit here and write a white male protagonist with us, but you could tell that I haven't spent a lot of time around a lot of white male people because it would make a generic image in my head. I always do it.
If you haven't spent a lot of time with white male, just like people.
I don't spend a lot of time with a lot of people, but like,
I tell this all the time that hell is filled with a room of white people.
Yeah. But like, you have to get those opinions. Like, look at Life is Strange 2, you know, Enano was improv by Gonzalo Martin. That wasn't from the Dontnod crew. That was something that Gonzalo Martin suggested, saying that this feels really natural, and they put it in. It's such a thing of Sean's dialect with Daniel, and you kind of get that. They had to sit there, you know, Michelle, Raul, Luke, all the other people involved in Dontnod, and had to listen to a recording session between Philip Bach and Gonzalo Martin, and then if he says, "Oh, this doesn't sound right," you take his opinion because he knows Latin America better. You know, he's from that region. He's going to give you a better perspective as how someone talks to you. And it's not like, you know, they're not making a satire video game. They're making an actual game about this Hispanic relationship between these two characters. You're putting all these other intricate themes on that affect people from Latin America, and it's like, obviously, you're going to have to talk about these. You're going to have to like get someone who actually has an opinion on it. So in itself, I feel like I've exhausted my opinions on the protagonist. I think we've gone down an unbelievable amount of topics, unless you've got anything else to add.
No. Like in terms of like representation, I hope they touch on autism a lot more and a lot sooner, rather than alluded to. Yeah.
I'd just like them to be a bit more bold, but again, then how does it affect sales? How does it affect getting the game out there? How can you, an indie developer would have a dream for this? Like, you know, you can have those kind of opportunities for it. I would say like most studios aren't gifted to have all those kind of opportunities to make games that are really unique and diverse because they have to fit some kind of model within. But with the actual like series in itself, I do think it needs to evolve a bit more now.
Oh yeah.
I think like mocap was great in True Colors. Full body performance capture was incredible. It really made the characters feel like they were there. But the story needs to expand now. It needs to really basically shackle itself away from what happened, because they kept this chapter structure in place, which can work, but again, it felt like it was lingering from what Life is Strange 1 and 2 were doing, the old episodic format, Telltale-esque series. I think you just need to kind of like have structures in place of like proper chapters, like do 1, 2, and 3, like, you know, maybe beginning, middle, and end. I'm rewriting everything. But like having a chapter structure in place, and then spending more time in the development and making it like, I don't know, if you're going to go bold and try and make it an open world game, if you want to make it limited open world, be a bit more out there with it. Bring like the other, you know, I feel like when you were walking around Haven at one point, I was like, this is really cool that you can actually just walk around the town. It's like kind of thing, but it felt really small though, didn't it?
I don't think Life is Strange needs to be open world. Like I think the term open world can be a little bit jarring.
It's lost meaning.
It has lost meaning. I like the open hub area, but I think you're right. I think there's a middle ground between what Haven was and open world. I think there can be a bigger hub, because the hub of Haven was just an L shape. Like that's it. It was just like, yeah, there was the bridge, and then you go to your left and like, oh, there's a street. I feel like there could have been like 2 other roads. Now, in terms of like open world, open hub, I think that a great example of what not to do is NBA 2K22. And I just started playing that, and the open world for that is so draining, because not only is everything so spread out, but your character moves so slow, and it's just so draining. It's just like, oh, you have, before you can play this game, why don't you go over here into this basketball court? Well, where's the basketball court? Oh, it's 5 miles that way, and you walk about 0.5 miles per hour in kilometers. I don't know. You calculate it, but like it's just so slow but so spread out. And I think the middle ground for that is like, yeah, have things spread out, but also have your character move at a normal pace. Like, and let me sprint, let me get there. But I think an open world can be frustrating, because it's just like, I just want to get this game done, you know?
Yeah, I think I'd be wrong about the open world at that point, where I think that you need open hub, but a bigger open hub, because like you said, you literally stole my point about the L shape of Haven Spring. It's an L shape. That's all it is. It's like one long street, and then you turn and you get there, and it's like you kind of want to just explore. You don't want it open world necessarily, but you want that little hub of like Haven Spring. You can kind of go down streets, turn streets, find a little side quest, find someone's cat, even if it's like even trivial side quest. But you have this, you know, like when you make it feel like it's a bit more homey, Life is Strange, you have these kind of like little quests and stuff in it. And that's kind of what I wanted a little bit more. And I feel like that's what the series needs to evolve, because like linear games can still exist, but like with Life is Strange and the kind of grand expectation of making it this kind of big franchise and everything else, I think you're going to have to, you know, do those kind of things. I think you're going to have to like really change up the gameplay setting, add something else in it, not make it a first person shoot. I'm not expecting like Alex Chen to run down with an AK-47 in the middle of Haven Springs, but like, you know, I'm expecting just a bit more to it. Like, you know, you can go down the streets, you can travel down it, whether you have like an e-scooter or something like an electronic scooter, and you can try and drive down like a, well, it's what happens in real life. Bring me in as a writer. What happens here, you get people driving down like 30 miles per hour trying to hit someone on a pavement. It's like, yeah, well, this is great, isn't it? But
well, even
it's like I want
22. There's a skateboard you can get on, and it's still slow, and it's just like, oh my god, kill me! Like,
why is that even in an NBA game? Like, why is that even in an NBA game?
Because every game needs to be open world, and it needs to have missions. Yeah. It's just like, dude, oh my god! I think NBA story games had a good dynamic. You know, it had a good formula, and then they're like, wait, open world, and it's like, well, no, it's like, whoa, calm down. Yeah, hated it.
An open hub would be great, or depends on what you want to do. I would be even more radical, saying that this is again why Life is Strange True Colors was like, I enjoyed it, but it kind of like rubbed me a little bit. Was like, you had Arcadia Bay, which was nice, having done it once, and that was good. But then with Life is Strange 2, you traveled everywhere. You traveled across America. You saw different locations, and you could be linear in that sense and travel at like X, Y, Z, A, B, C, different. Yeah, and it felt, and I love that. I don't necessarily want somewhere concentrated in Life is Strange True Colors. If you want to like go down that road, if you want to do a concentrated area like Haven Springs, I wouldn't mind it, as long as you make an open hub, which is a big town you can actually explore, not just an L shape, and kind of go around and add a bit more to it. Because I think I would probably be safe to say that one of the most, you know, people criticize about Life is Strange True Colors, it was short. It just felt really short. Like how quick was it to get from like there to the finish line? It was like, hang on a minute. So I didn't get to really spend that much time doing like a lot of other things. I wouldn't mind that, but I wouldn't even mind for the Life is Strange series just to keep going down this kind of like path where it's like, you know, you do what you do with 2, where you travel places. Like whether the game, I think the game has to be set in America. I don't know if you can do Europe.
You could probably do Canada. Do Montreal.
yeah, maybe, yeah.
I mean,
I think that
I want it to be set in a different light. I want it to be set in a different setting other than the West Coast. You know, put it in the East Coast. That's where I'm from. East Coast, baby. Or as I like to call it, Beast Coast. But, you know, West Coast can just float off into Hawaii. But, no, like, do it like East Coast. Because, like, okay, so Life is Strange 1 took place in Oregon. Life is Strange Before the Storm, Oregon. Life is Strange 2 took place in Oregon to California to Mexico. And Life is Strange True Colors took place in Colorado. So it's still West Coast, but take place in the East Coast, man. Go to Boston, Philly, New York, you know, like, or even if you want like a more forest setting, go to North Carolina, go to West Virginia. The Twin Mirror, which was another Dontnod game, took place in West Virginia. It was East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
That was West Virginia. So that's an East Coast state. You know, at least take place in different America, you know? Take place in the South. Don't do it in the South.
Imagine. Yeah, like that's what I'd like to see with more of the series, like just kind of exploring those different routes, going down going down those kind of places. I think like the core of the series should stay the same: new protagonist, new kind of like setting, new kind of like stories, kind of like, you know, and in itself, like even if the series evolves, I'd like to keep the tradition where you bring in actors who haven't got huge backgrounds. I love that this series sets up people, you know, gives the platforms to the Hannah Tells, the Kylie Browns, even the Ashley Birch. She did do Borderlands, but, you know, still like, you know, the Ashley Birches, the Erica Moris, the Han Sotos, the Anastasia Davidson, that gives you a platform, that gives these actors who are kind of like either in the industry or early in the industry or who have been working for a while, an
Or
opportunity
like
to really
new
work in
musicians, like giving them a gig or two. You know, it's like, I don't know.
Well, unless you can make some beats like I could have Sid Matters or Daughter, I'm not gonna, I ain't gonna side with you. But if you can do that, then I'm all for you to make a soundtrack for the game. But yeah, like that's what I want to see with Life is Strange. I want to see it evolve. It needs to evolve because otherwise it will stagnate. And then when it stagnates, then what happens next is, eventually Square Enix would pull the IP and it would go. They'd keep hold of the IP, but then it would go into limbo.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if we're going to make anybody like into a soundtrack for Life is Strange, Reptalians, I think should be definitely involved. But that's just me. Check out Reptalians. But yeah, no, I definitely want to see a better dynamic. I want a new setting in America. I want a different representation. There's still some people who are not represented in the right way, like biracial people. Like that's why I love listening to Logic's music, because he talks about the struggles of being biracial. He's half black, half white, and I love his songs where he talks about like how black people don't accept him in the community because he's light skinned, and then white people don't accept him because in one of his songs, like he'll talk about like how he should be ashamed to be black. So he's not accepted in any of these communities, and he's just kind of stuck in the middle. So biracial people, are also in a struggle here. So I just want to see different dynamics to be represented, because there's a lot going on with humanity that we can represent,
Indeed. I feel like it's a very good, powerful point. I feel like we should end there unless you have anything else to add.
Last best things is still stand with Ukraine. Ukraine is still struggling. Go follow LIS Timer. He's still posting daily reminders that he's still surviving. But stand with Ukraine and fuck Putin.
Well, there you go. I think that's a good way of ending it. And thank you, LangstonSpeaks, for the topic idea. If you do have another topic idea suggestion, please leave it in the comments. We'll check it out. We'll do it maybe next week. Month after, who knows, but we'll add it to the list. So that is the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are watching on YouTube again, do please subscribe, comment, share. It does really help with the channel. It helps with the algorithms. And also, if you're listening on podcast services again, give us a rating on there. It does help. There's 2 people who give us 5 ratings on Apple Podcasts, which I really do appreciate. So yeah, do give us a rating on that and a follow if you can possibly. But yeah, it was nice to be back. Obviously, slowly but surely things will start picking up back up on this channel. I hope you enjoyed that. We obviously moved to Riverside. We'll give you a nice clean audio and clean video, hopefully, by the time this turns out. And I don't know if the new StrangeCast theme will be in this episode yet. Adam recorded it, he did it, but I'm going to try and figure out where my editing skills are at that point to see if I can get it in there. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Stay tuned. We're back in 2 weeks with a new StrangeCast episode. Until then, see you later, guys.
Peace.